Welcome to Long Story Short, a series where big historical events and themes are explained in a concise way that does not sacrifice facts or analysis. The traditional narrative of American history is positive and triumphant. Battles, a revolution, and the formation of the so-called land of the free. But in today's episode, we're going to be probing this narrative to see that it does not hold up. The founding of America was a bloody process which involved violence, brutality, and land colonization. Indigenous Americans lost 1.5 billion acres of land, which amounted to nearly 99% of which they had previously occupied. In this first part, we're going to be exploring the beginnings of this process with the European Colonisation of the Americas, which set the foundation for future events. Native Americans had inhabited their land for tens of thousands of years before the appearance of the European colonizers. Over these many millennia, there was no uniform experience. Instead, there was a multiplicity and change in the way which people lived, with various languages and customs determined by factors such as geography, climate, and social context. The people of the city of Cahokia lived very different lives to the nations of the Great Plains. However, there were some connections between these peoples with complex webs of trade. Routes through the Missouri River have been highlighted by dentillum shells uncovered in archaeological digs. They travelled from the northwest coast nations onto the Great Plains. Overall, it has been estimated that the population in the Americas ranged from 50 million to 75 million, predating the European colonizers. This was something that would change, however, with the oncoming violence. The first of the European colonizers came infamously in 1492. Christopher Columbus led an expedition in the name of Spain in the search for a new trade route to Asia. This was because the known trade route to Asia was controlled by the Ottoman Empire, whose Spain wished to bypass. Instead of finding a new way to Asia, Columbus landed in the Caribbean, possibly on the island of Guanahani. In historical memory, Columbus's landing is heralded as a moment of the quote-unquote discovery of the New World. But it is clear that this was no discovery, nor was this a new world. Firstly, these lands were already inhabited, and the presence of Europeans did not change this. Secondly, peaceful exploration did not happen. Columbus's behaviour towards the natives was indicative of the power dynamics which were to come. During his 4 voyages, he enslaved and inflicted violence on the native Taino people, which resulted in the wiping out of all but 500 of them in just 50 years. He tried to establish various colonies on native land in Haiti, which he renamed Hispaniola. Upon his return to Spain, Columbus essentially engendered a race between the European powers, who wished to plunder stolen wealth, spices, and enslaved natives, which Columbus had brought back. The Treaty of Tordesillas was signed between Spain and Portugal in 1494, amid Columbus's early conquests. The document essentially was the beginning of colonial processes, with European powers laying claim to land which was not theirs. Spanish and Portuguese powers, in their minds in the treaty, split the world into imaginary spheres of influence. The Portuguese were apparently to have all the land east of Brazil, including Africa and Asia, and Spain was to have the land west of Brazil, which meant the Americas. During the 1500s, Spain sent ships and men to conquer land in the Americas. It was not just the crown which had a vested interest in taking land. The Catholic Church sent missionaries to culturally and socially conquer the locals under the guise of converting them and civilizing them. Firstly, land in the Caribbean, Central and South America was stolen from local tribes and nations. For example, Mexico was forcibly taken by Spain in 1519. Interest then further expanded onto the north into areas including modern-day New Mexico and Florida. In the 1540s, 2 Spanish expeditions happened around the Rio Grande River. They also explored into Florida, and this was not the first time, with the first expedition taking place in 1513. During these expeditions, the Spanish murdered local indigenous people. Permanent colonization began in the 1560s in Florida, with the colony of St. Augustine on the land of the Timucua people. Spanish claims to stolen land did not prevent other Europeans from having colonial presence in the North Americas. Indeed, French Huguenots had a colony in Florida in the early 1560s before the Spanish colony of St. Augustine. The first whisperings of French colonization happened with Jacques Carter falsely claiming what is now Canada. The majority of the other European colonial presence, however, began later on than Spain and France, in the late 16th and 17th centuries. For example, the English founded the failed Roanoke colony in the 1580s. Jamestown was the first permanent British colony nearly 20 years later, founded on the land of peoples such as the Powhatan. The Dutch similarly had their first colony in the 1610s, which they called New Amsterdam. The initial European wave of colonization was a mix of different aggressors, including soldiers sent directly by the Crown and various Christian missionaries. Chartered companies also engaged in colonization, such as the Virginia Company, which was established in England in 1606. Private individuals and groups also colonized native land. Religion was a motivator for this, particularly for Puritans. Traditional narratives state that Puritans fled to the Americas to escape religious persecution. However, many in fact were motivated by zealous missions to create what they viewed as a quote-unquote godly colony. This mission to them justified the oppression and violence towards the Native Americans. The onslaught of European colonizers profoundly affected the experiences of Native American populations, especially those whose land the Europeans took by force. The European colonizers inflicted violence and brutality onto the native populations. Countless villages and homes were destroyed in the campaigns of the Europeans, who searched for gold, land, and resources to be exploited. Moreover, the European colonizers brought with them plants and livestock, which created ecological changes to the Americas. Traditional ways of farming and hunting, which had persisted for thousands of years, were disrupted by the presence of new species. This meant that many indigenous nations faced starvation. With the Europeans also came disease. Illnesses such as influenza, smallpox, and measles spread quickly and destructively throughout native peoples. As I stated earlier, it is estimated that there previously was between 50 million to 75 million people before European colonial activity. However, because of the disease, starvation, and violence inflicted by Europeans, only around 6 million indigenous people were left. For those who survived, there were profound transformations to their lives. Many were enslaved by Europeans to divulge knowledge about the land or to labour in colonies and plantations. Some tribes retained their land and resisted the Europeans, such as in the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 against the Spanish, a subject which is worth a video in itself. Overall, there was a geographical shift. By 1700, European powers had colonies in South America, the Caribbean, Central America, and along the eastern seaboard of North America. What ensued was mass land dispossession and the building of a violent colonial system which was underpinned by a false civilizing mission. As Ned Blackhawk states, European colonialism in America is a lived reality. Since 1492, its everyday manifestations and interaction have shaped the modern world.